Have you ever felt lost? Have you gone through situations that seem to make no sense? Moments when the pain felt endless, and you asked yourself, why is this happening to me? I know what that's like. Sometimes it feels like everything is falling apart, and the weight you're carrying is unbearable. But I want you to pay close attention to something very important. You're not suffering in vain. It can be hard to see this in the middle of the storm. Questions pile up, tears fall, and your heart feels heavy. But there's a truth you need to keep in your heart. God has a purpose for your life, even when everything seems out of control. The first thing we need to understand is that suffering is not a sign of abandonment. Many times, we think that when everything starts to go wrong, God has forgotten us, or worse, that He is punishing us. But that is not the truth. In 2 Corinthians 4:17, Paul reminds us that our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Pause and reflect. What you are facing now, as hard as it may be, is not the end of your story. This pain is shaping you for something greater, something more beautiful than you can imagine. But how can God use suffering? First of all, it's important to understand that God is not the author of evil. He does not send pain to punish us. However, He allows certain situations because He knows it's through those very experiences that we are transformed. God never loses control of our lives. When we hit rock bottom, He is there, right beside us, holding us up. I know that in the middle of pain, it's almost impossible to see a purpose. We just want the pain to stop. But maybe, just maybe, God is allowing this process because something glorious is being formed inside of you. Try to see your pain from a different perspective. Think of how gold is refined. It must go through the fire to be purified. The same happens with us. God uses suffering to shape us, purify our character, and draw us closer to Him. Every tear, every step of faith is making you stronger, more resilient, more like Christ. Of course, this journey isn't easy. We're not here to romanticize pain or ignore the suffering you're going through. But it's precisely in those hard moments that our faith is tested. And that's when we see God's character revealed most clearly. He doesn't abandon us. He sustains us, comforts us, and guides us. You might think, God feels distant. He doesn't understand what I'm feeling. But let me remind you, Jesus, the Son of God, also suffered. He experienced pain, rejection, humiliation, even death. He knows exactly what it is to suffer. He's not distant from your pain. He knows it personally. And He promised never to leave you. When loneliness feels unbearable, remember the cross. Christ endured the ultimate suffering to make sure you would never be alone. And you might ask, but what is the purpose of all this? What does God want to teach me through so much pain? There's no single answer. Every person walks a different journey, but most of the time, it's through pain that God reveals His purpose. Often, what you're going through today is preparing you to help someone tomorrow, someone who will face what you've already overcome. God uses suffering to shape us for His glory. Suffering is not a sign that you're not being heard. On the contrary, it's an opportunity for God to act deeply in your life. In Romans 5:3-4, Paul says that suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance produces character. The pain you feel today is fertile soil where God plants seeds of faith, hope, and strength. When you look back, you'll see how this difficult season taught you valuable lessons. You'll be stronger, more compassionate, more mature. As hard as it is, remember, there is a purpose. You are not suffering in vain. If you feel like you're in a dark tunnel with no way out, know that the light may be closer than you think. Sometimes, God doesn't remove the pain immediately because there's something you need to learn there, something that will take you to a new level of understanding about who you are in Him. He's teaching you to trust, to depend fully on Him, to understand that the victory is His, not ours. Have you ever wondered why so many heroes of the faith faced great hardships? The apostles, for example, endured prisons, persecution, and even death. They weren't superheroes. They were ordinary people. And it was through suffering that they discovered the depth of God's love and strength. Even in the greatest adversity, God was there, and He never stopped working. They knew that despite the pain, there was a greater purpose at stake. And now I ask you, what is God's purpose for you? Maybe right now, you're wondering why all this is happening. You might not have all the answers yet, and that's okay. God's purpose for your life is often revealed little by little, in stages. There are situations He allows you to experience today to prepare you for something greater in the future. Even if you don't understand the reason for the pain right now, believe this: God is working in your heart and shaping your life with purpose. God never allows suffering without a reason. He doesn't let you go through hard times without also having a promise of transformation. What you're facing today is shaping who you are becoming, someone you may never have imagined you could be. So don't give up. God is doing something amazing in your story. Now more than ever, it's time to trust, to believe that He has a perfect plan for you. The suffering you experience does not define who you are. What defines your identity is God's unshakable love, the grace that covers you daily, and the eternal purpose He has set aside for you. The pain you feel today is not the end of the story, but part of the process. Every tear, every step of faith is bringing you closer to the person God has called you to be. As hard as it may be now, know this: you are being prepared for something glorious. Take a deep breath. Your suffering is not in vain. There are moments in the walk of faith when we feel completely alone. Maybe you've experienced that feeling of being lost, like no one around you understands your pain. It can feel like your pain is unique and incomprehensible. But it's exactly in those moments that we need to remember a core truth. God never distances Himself from you. Even when everything seems dark, even when the clouds of affliction block your vision, He's still by your side, working within you in ways you often can't see. God is not a distant observer, indifferent to your suffering. He is present, involved, and understands every feeling you have. Hebrews 4:15 reminds us that we have a high priest who sympathizes with our weaknesses, Jesus, who was tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. Christ became flesh, lived through human pain, and knows your anguish deeply. And He doesn't just understand, He cares. When you hit your lowest point, God doesn't pull away. He draws near, walks with you, and works in your life, even when we don't understand the process. Although the reason for suffering is not always clear, one thing is certain: God uses it as a tool for transformation. This process can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it's in that very place that we are molded into the image of Christ. The Bible speaks of the flesh being broken so the spirit can thrive, a purification process where God removes what is impure and strengthens faith. Sometimes the challenges in life feel like insurmountable walls, but what seems to be an obstacle may actually be God's preparation for something greater. Think of Job's life. He lost everything: family, wealth, health. But in the end, God restored him abundantly. Nothing was in vain. The suffering turned him into a living testimony of God's faithfulness. Sometimes what is familiar must be left behind, so God's new can be born. God may allow certain things to be taken from us so that we can learn to depend more on Him. Throughout the Bible, we see miracles happening amid pain. God used the desert, the prison, and suffering as places of transformation and revelation. The desert, for example, was not a place of punishment, but of preparation. It was there that Moses heard God's voice from the burning bush. It was in the desert that Israel learned to depend daily on divine care. Many times, it's in spiritual deserts that we most clearly perceive our true need for God. It's also important to understand that the way we deal with pain can directly reflect our purpose. During a struggle, it might feel impossible to see any blessing ahead, but by persevering in faith, you become more equipped to be God's instrument in someone else's life. Suffering can be the stage God chooses to place you in a position of great influence and impact. The problem is that, in pain, our perspective tends to narrow. We focus only on what is right in front of us and lose sight of the bigger picture. That's why it's vital to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. Remember Peter? He walked on water while he looked at Christ. But the moment he shifted his gaze to the wind and the waves, he began to sink. Suffering can make us feel like that, as if we're drowning. But if we keep our focus on Jesus, He will hold us up. God even uses difficulties to teach us to trust Him more fully. In hard times, we are more likely to seek His presence sincerely. In peaceful moments, we tend to rely on our own strength. That's why suffering is also an invitation for God to be the center of our lives, our safe refuge. It may seem contradictory, but pain often brings us closer to God and to the people around us. It creates deeper, more genuine connections, transforms us from the inside out, shaping not only our character, but also our hearts. Pain leads us to brokenness, where we can truly see who we are and who God wants us to be. In moments when everything feels unbearable, it can be hard to see what God is doing. But nothing He does is without purpose. Every tear you shed, every battle you face, has a divine purpose. When you're in the valley, God is preparing your path to the mountaintop. Suffering does not have the power to cancel God's plans. Nothing can frustrate what He has already written for your life. Even if everything seems meaningless right now, God sees beyond. To Him, suffering is a powerful tool to lead you to the fullness He has prepared. Jesus Himself faced the cross so we could live in freedom and victory. His suffering, immense and deep, brought redemption to humanity. He did not suffer in vain, and you are not suffering in vain either. Remember, there is always a greater purpose, even if you can't see it yet. God knows your entire story, and it's not over. There's still so much left to live. Maybe, at the moment, all you can see is pain, but God is already working behind the scenes, taking care of every detail and guiding your steps toward the future He has prepared for you. His purpose for your life was never an accident, and He will never abandon you. The pain that seems unbearable today will be transformed into an experience of faith, power, and hope. And one day you'll be able to share this testimony with others who also need comfort. When you look back, you'll clearly understand what God was doing. Your scars, physical or emotional, will be marks of divine faithfulness, living proof of the strength that sustained you when everything seemed to fall apart. Just like a wound leaves a scar when it heals, your pain will become a permanent sign of God's love for you. Each of us has an eternal purpose, and whatever pain you are facing, it is not in vain. God has a plan, and it is greater than any suffering or hardship. The journey of faith isn't easy, but it's always meaningful. Even in pain, you are closer to God than you think. He walks beside you, and what He started, He will finish. Trust the process. Sometimes pain clouds our vision. The future feels hidden behind clouds of uncertainty. Suffering strikes the heart, and everything loses its meaning. But it's precisely in that moment that God works the most, shaping your soul, strengthening your spirit, and preparing you for something great. The refining process you're going through now is not the end, but the beginning. Something much greater is being forged in your life. It can be hard to understand how pain can have a purpose, but every tear shed reveals that God is refining you. Like a blacksmith heats metal to mold it into its ideal shape. This process is intense, but the result is stronger, more precious, more enduring. Think of the great men and women of faith. They all went through suffering. Abraham, Moses, David, Paul. All faced pain, doubts, and loss. But it was precisely in those moments that they experienced God's faithfulness most powerfully. Without those challenges, perhaps they wouldn't have become who they were. Jesus, our Savior, went through extreme pain, abandonment, and the cross. But on the third day, the resurrection proved that pain doesn't have the final word. And in the same way, your suffering will not be the end of your story either. God uses pain as a tool for transformation, and transformation leads to glory. When He allows suffering, He's not punishing you. He's preparing you. You may not see the end of the process, but each step is bringing you closer to His divine plan for you. Sometimes we need to lose to gain. Suffering comes when we hold on to what is temporary. But through pain, God invites us to let go of the temporary and embrace the eternal. He doesn't want us to live with a broken heart, but He allows certain pains so that our faith matures, our trust deepens, and our life is filled with His peace. Pain also reveals. It shows who we are, where our weaknesses lie, and where our strength resides. When you're at your limit, God shows up more powerfully. He is the one who sustains you, who strengthens you when you can't go on. It's in adversity that the greatest miracles happen, because when we are broken, He fills us in a new and powerful way. God's grace is made perfect in weakness, as Paul said, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." 2 Corinthians 12:9. When we are weak, we make room for Christ's power to be revealed more fully in us. Your pain is not just about you. It can be the channel God uses to reach others. Suffering brings empathy, compassion, and makes us more human. Sometimes God allows us to go through certain situations so we can comfort others later on. What you're living through today may be the answer for someone tomorrow. And remember, you are not your pain. You are not your wounds, nor your past. You are a creation of God, with an eternal purpose. God sees you not by what you're facing, but by what He is forming in you. Suffering can teach humility, patience, and above all, total dependence on God. And when the night feels long, remember, morning always comes. Weeping may last for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Psalm 30, verse 5. God remains in control even in the storms. He's not letting you sink. He's guiding you. Sometimes we try to fight with our own strength, but His invitation is for us to rest in His wisdom, His timing, His plan. Trust, even when everything seems uncertain. He is your firm anchor. He may not take you out of the battle right away, but He will give you strength to go on. As the Apostle Paul said, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Philippians 4:13. Look ahead. Today's suffering is just one part of God's plan. Don't let present pain keep you from seeing the blessings that are coming. God never wastes a tear. He uses every moment, every battle, to shape you and bring you closer to His purpose. Even in hardship, God reveals the best in you. He's creating in your heart faith, hope, and trust. You are not suffering in vain. He has a purpose for every step of your journey and is with you in every step, every tear, every breath. Trust. God is faithful to complete the good work He began in you. Today's pain is the preparation for the great testimony of victory that is coming. Don't give up. Your journey is just beginning, and the best is yet to come.